So this video is from Kneecap Jake. I really like this World of Warcraft content creator. He's phenomenal. Every video of his about World of Warcraft I've enjoyed. This man is clearly old and bald. He knows what he's talking about whenever it comes to World of Warcraft. And today, he decided to speak about the split in the WoW community. Now, I haven't watched this video. I'm going to react to it, obviously, for the first time, like I always do. But the topic does intrigue me because there is a massive split in the WoW community. And it's being reinforced by Blizzard itself. Because you have like 7 different versions of the same game. All of them offer different servers and different experiences, which some may look at it and think, oh, you know what, it's fine. You can play your own version of WoW. I think it's really bad. Not only it hurts immersion, it created such a huge schism in the fan base, it cannot be mended unless Blizzard actually go the Classic Plus route and just brings everyone to the table at once. I really hope they would do that, especially after shutting down my favorite Turtle WoW private server, which, my god, I still want to cry just speaking about this. But at the end of the day, I guess, you know, Blizzard would just do Blizzard things and there's nothing we can do to stop them. Only hope for the better. So yeah.
Ask me where any dungeon is up to Wrath of the Lich King, and I can take you there without even thinking. Whether that's Dire Maul, the Arcatraz, or Halls of Lightning, I know exactly where they are. But ask me where a dungeon is from one of the latest expansions, and I couldn't tell you if you put a gun to my head. You'll just have to shoot me. I've run hundreds of dungeons across many alts in retail, but I haven't actually gone to one in years. I've just queued for them. I've stood in the city and waited for the pop-up, clicked accept and got teleported in, and when we reached the end of the run, everyone just quietly goes their separate ways without a word being said. And depending on who you ask, Dungeon Finder is either a fantastic feature or something that helped strip World of Warcraft of what made it feel like an MMO in the first place.
Oh, interesting. So he's going to talk about the Dungeon Finder conundrum that has been a contention point ever since it came into fruition, right? Ever since it took its first breath inside of World of Warcraft, this has been a huge tear within the community. So he's actually right about that. I wonder, what you guys think about the Dungeon Finder if you played World of Warcraft? I don't know if you're here for like the WoW content, but if you played WoW, what do you think about the Dungeon Finder? Because in my opinion, you know, it has good parts, but it also did much more damage than good. So yeah, kind of generic thing in MMO nowadays. True. But at the same time, I think it done more wrong than right, in my opinion. Because let me tell you, well, first I'll say that I think that the best possible solution is actually a mix of both. I would agree that making a dungeon finder that helps you find a group, advertise your group, is good, but the whole teleporting to the dungeon thing is really, really bad. I think it was detrimental to the game because you had to actually meet up with people, and while you were walking to the dungeon, you got to chat, and you understood, you know, very shallow, right? It was very shallow interaction, but it was interaction and friction nonetheless. So you got to know who you're about to group with, and who you're about to run the dungeons with, and when it came to classic World of Warcraft, vanilla, obviously it wasn't classic back in the day, is that the dungeons were really, really long, and you knew it was a commitment. So if you wanted to run let's take, for example, Marathon, right? Really long dungeon, can take easily up to 2 hours if you're not familiar with the layout. You had to make absolutely sure that the people you're running this dungeon with won't wipe, or at the very least do their utmost to not die in the dungeon whatsoever. So that was really good interaction, and unfortunately, we lost that with looking for group. And it's just very, very unfortunate. Looking for group is good, but let him go to the spot as well. Yes. So again, like people agree. People absolutely agree. Just make the dungeon, find you a group, but walk to the dungeon. That's the important part. I think it's kind of, you know, it will help mend that tear. It will never fully satisfy either side, but it's a nice compromise for both.
The truth is, they're both kind of right. When it was released, it felt like a great thing. It was really convenient. There was even an achievement for using it. But over time, Dungeon Finder has become the main feature that people point to when they say WoW has changed for the worse. When the world started to feel smaller, and when other players started to feel less like people and more like NPCs with better AI. Honestly, I understand both sides of this conversation because I've played through the faff of Classic. I know what it's like trying to build a group when when nobody wants to tank, or travelling halfway across the world just for someone to leave before the run even starts.
Well, to be fair, the nobody wants to tank problem is a whole different issue. I spoke about it in a previous video, you can check that out for yourself, but I mean, Blizzard just need to fix that, and they'll never will, because they like the community this way. They like a community who ostracize people who don't use the most optimal route to tank a dungeon. And then people are wondering why there are no tanks in the game. And by the way, I'm speaking as a tank main.
Those moments I found myself incredibly frustrated.
I'm playing Protection Warrior right now.
For a Dungeon Finder feature to exist. It's never been easier to assess the impact of Dungeon Finder, because now we've got multiple versions of WoW running at once. And having played this game since 2007 originally, and as an ex-retail player, I've lived through most of these changes myself. So today, I want to look at how Dungeon Finder changed World of Warcraft.
Oh, how Dungeon Finder changed World of Warcraft. Damn. It's like a eulogy.
Whenever people talk about the points that WoW started to change, people talk about Dungeon Finder. They may bring up the in-game store, or the transmog system, or even being able to fly. But Dungeon Finder is the main feature that people point to when WoW started to feel different, when it started to feel less social. A lot of things have changed about WoW over the years. Zones have completely changed.
Damn, wait, when the cash up actually came into WoW? Was it Pandaria? I remember Asmongold talking about it back in the day. It used to be only mounts too, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, I started playing during Draenor, which, you know, was god-awful mistake, but what did I know at the time, right? I was at high school, so, it's just so funny to look back and actually see that Blizzard had the audacity to add a cash up to the game. I had no idea if players actually stood against it or not back in the day. But yeah, I'm not sure, maybe Wrath of the Lich King? I don't think Wrath of the Lich King had cash up. I mean, it sounds too early, right? I'm not really sure.
Class designs have changed, and as the game has got older, more and more convenience features have been added. Yet with all these changes, Dungeon Finder is always the one that people come back to. And that's because people remember how those systems changed how you feel when you're playing the game. Dungeon Finder changed the everyday experience of playing the game. How you started your group suddenly changed. Instead of searching for people, you pressed find group. How you even got to the dungeon suddenly completely changed. No longer did you have to travel across the world, you were just teleported straight to the start of the dungeon. Finding other party members was simplified drastically. No longer did you have to search in trade chat or type into the world chat looking for more, you just clicked find group. It reduced the amount of effort it took to start a dungeon. Effectively, the barrier to entry had been lowered. And that's what makes the Dungeon Finder such an interesting feature to look back on, because it sits right in the middle of what was giving convenience to players. It changed the social dynamic of the game. It changed the world design. You didn't have to walk to the dungeon anymore. But most importantly, it changed players' behavior in the game. And I remember when it came out, it didn't feel like
Is this Crimson Desert? Yes.
a disaster or a bad move for the game. I was super excited to get in. Now I could just press the I button, click find group and go straight to a dungeon. I could now live out my dreams of just doing dungeons and leveling alts. It's become a feature that's become contentious in retrospect because of what else changed in the game too. So that leads me to the bigger question that I want to ask, which is, was Dungeon Finder really the turning point for World of Warcraft, or was the game starting to shift and it just became a symbol for that change?
No, it was the pandas.
Before the Dungeon Finder tool, there was actually a feature in original TBC that allowed you to add yourself to a pool of players also looking for a group. And we can see the blue post here from back in the day, a new looking for group tool designed to assist players in finding groups for instant dungeons and quests will now be available. This is a means to expedite the process. I didn't even know this feature existed when I originally played TBC, but when I got to play TBC Classic, I made good use of this group finder tool, and it did make finding groups a lot easier. Now I could look through the group of players, decide who could join my group, how to build the group together quickly. It did honestly expedite that process, but it still left the group making process entirely in the player's hands. You still had to make the group yourself, choose who to invite, and actually travel to that dungeon yourself. And oftentimes in TBC Classic, I found myself having more success if I went to that city and put the message out, and I'd get a lot of people messaging me that didn't seem to be sitting in that group finder tool. Wrath of the Lich King is when the dungeon finder tool that we use today was first implemented, where this whole process of finding people and making a group was consolidated into that one-click button. You queue up by what role you want to do, the game goes out and finds all of the relevant people to make that group, it teleports you straight in there, and you just get started. It turned the whole dungeon system into something faster and much more efficient. Now, I don't even really need to know anything about the other players in my group. In that TBC version, or if I was searching for people through the world chat, I would probably check out their class, what sort of role they do, and make a composition that I feel works. But in Dungeon Finder, it just does that all for you. And the truth is, I might not ever see you again. It almost feels like queuing up for a team deathmatch on Call of Duty. I just want to get in,
I see you there, Sunshine.
and get
How are you
out
doing?
again. But the thing is, in Wrath of the Lich King, there was still reasons to know where the dungeon entrances were. First of all, Dungeon Finder didn't actually come out till the game had already been out for a little while. And you also had your daily heroic dungeon quests, and this might involve you getting your team together and actually going to the dungeon because you specifically want to do one dungeon to get that quest done. As far as my experience and playing through Wrath again during Wrath Classic, those daily heroic dungeon quests did actually get me out in the world, going to the dungeon instead of using the dungeon finder tool. And today in Classic WoW, we have that TBC iteration of the dungeon finder tool, which does make group making a lot easier. But before these tools existed, it was a lot more faff. It could take absolutely ages to find a group because there might not be any tanks online.
Damn.
There might not be enough
Man, he
healers
flexing.
online, and you're really hoping.
See, I told you, some WoW players are smart. You saw how he did the thing. It's crazy. The Rubik's Cube had no chance. He defeated that boss as well.
That there's going to be someone willing to join your group at whatever time of day that you're playing. And if it's a dungeon that's really far away, like Moradin as an Alliance player, just the fact that that dungeon is really far away and in itself a complete faff to get to puts people off even bothering to do that dungeon in the first place. And don't talk to me about when you're on your way to the dungeon and someone drops out, especially if it's a tank. You might as well just abandon the group at that point. If you weren't playing at peak times or the game had been out for a little while and the server didn't have that many people on it anymore, making these groups is a painful experience. It did make the dungeon entrances a memorable place in the world because I had to travel there every time, and I knew that I needed to invest an amount of time to be able to do that dungeon. If I'm all the way in Stormwind and I want to do a dungeon in Zul'Farrak, I've got to travel across most of the world to get there, so I know that I need to dedicate at least a couple of hours to get this dungeon done. And again, if I'm sat in Stormwind and I want to do Scholomance or Strathholm, I've got to sit on a flight path for what feels like 10 plus minutes watching my character on a griffin, and I'm not actually playing the game at that point. I might as well go and make myself a cup of tea.
Well, that is what you actually do. You don't really sit and watch yourself ride a griffin. You just click the point, you go do something, and then you come back and you're already there. So I kind of don't understand that point.
Thing I did enjoy about the old system was the looking for group chat. Now this was a world chat and it did make the game feel more alive. Even if I was solo questing, playing on my own, doing whatever I'm doing, I've got a world chat of people and they might be talking absolute nonsense in the chat, or they might genuinely be trying to find a group. But just having that chat there and seeing all these other people talking, it made the game feel like it was populated. It's almost like having a Twitch chat live in your game.
True, and now it's spammed with selling gold, lowest prices, whisper me. How fun is that, man? I really love the new Classic experience. It's just so good and well made. Truly, Blizzard is a pioneer.
Because that travel was frustrating at times and did take a lot of time, it made those dungeons incredibly memorable. I know exactly where they are. I don't even have to think, and I just know, like more than the back of my hand, how to get to that dungeon and the route that I need to take and roughly how long it's going to take me to get there. In Retail WoW, I have leveled up a number of alts, and primarily my choice of playing is doing dungeons. It's one of my favourite ways to play. I might be doing a dungeon in one part of the world because the group finder's taken me there, do another one, and now I'm in another part of the world, or maybe I'm in a different expansion. I can talk to Chromie here, change the timeline I'm in, and I never even...
Man, I'm still to this day, am so surprised that Blizzard didn't take any amount of effort whatsoever to change Shadow Priest Shadow form. I mean, it still looks the same. I don't know why they do this. Like, why Shadow Priest always have to be the butt of the joke? Why for once they cannot look cool? I don't get it. At least in Legion they were peak. I gotta admit that though.
And have to go to where that dungeon is.
By the way, I'm a
Dungeon
Shadow
Finder
Priest
does
main in
save an
Classic.
incredible amount of time, but it also removes travelling the world from the experience. The world doesn't really matter anymore. These are just places you get teleported to and you do a dungeon and leave. If I put myself in the shoes of a new player, and I recently did Dungeon Finder with a new player, it's incredibly confusing. I wouldn't know where any of these places are, and I would probably never find them. But to be honest with you, a new player would probably not find themselves talking to Chromie in the first place. But that's just a point aside. And quickly,
They would messed up. They would be messed up in how do you call it? Dragonlands, right? This expansion and Dragon's Blight. Yes, the Dragon's Blight expansion, and no. They won't know anything that they're doing because all they're going to be I'm getting mind boggled by Blizzard. Okay, they're shooting their lasers at me. Trust me. All they are going to do is help big dragons fight little dragons because for some reason big dragons are now weaker. And it doesn't really make any sense because previously you fought alongside them and they were really great at grand battles, but for now they cannot even defend themselves for a few whelps. And while you're not doing that, you're going to do some gardening. Yes. How fun is that? Oh, and take selfies with whelps. Okay. I forgot about that.
I want to address the elephant in the room that some of you will have been saying, the fact that Activision bought Blizzard. But this video isn't about that. Social friction. Let's talk about it. The stuff in the game that's annoying, but
by the way, I absolutely agree with what he said there. It's not about Activision purchasing Blizzard. It was never about that. I mean, Activision did completely suck the life out of this company 100%. No one is refuting that. But most major decisions that were bad were made by Blizzard. Okay? Like, nobody told them to put Dungeon Finder inside of the game. Right? The cash up, it's Activision, 100%. They needed to make quick profit, I get that. But in-game decisions that are tied to gameplay were never made by Activision. No, it was just simply bad decisions made by the designers.
It feel like a real experience to play. If you're playing a game, you don't really want to be waiting, relying on other people to do something, having to socialise when you don't want to, let alone doing the admin work to even get a group started. These things are annoying, and they force social interaction. Without a dungeon finder tool, I can't do a dungeon unless I either get invited to a group or I invite someone else. It forces you to depend on the other players in the game, and it kind of gives a reason for that social side to exist. Otherwise, why would I bother talking to anyone? That social friction creates heat. My hands are literally hot rubbing my hands together, and when I'm trying to get a group together and I can't find a tank and I whisper loads of people to try and get a group together and it happens, I might be a bit annoyed, but that dungeon is slightly more memorable to me. You know, without this friction, it runs cold. If I get invited to a group and I haven't had that friction together, I'll be honest, I'm probably going to forget that I even had that experience a few hours later. But we do need to be real here. The Dungeon Finder solved real problems. You can get into dungeons quickly. We've established that. But what about...
And he didn't mention that, but by the way, the friction is also important because you may meet with those people later down your path. And it happened to me numerous times while playing Classic. So you can meet up with a tank or maybe a DPS or a healer, whatever. And later on, will you need someone for a dungeon? Hey, you might queue up together again. And it happens numerous times every time you play Classic. Just play, like, trust me, it's really, really good, and it's more fun because now you're familiar with a person, and you get to crack jokes together, you get to reminisce about the old times where you wiped on a dungeon, whatever, and it's so fun. It's, like, good. It what builds a community, and it is so great, and we lost that.
If you've got limited time to play, you ain't got time to wait around for a group to magically form itself in Classic. You just press the find group button.
If you have limited time to play, don't play MMORPGs. That is something I've been saying for a long time. And I know some people hate me for saying that, but I'm gonna keep saying that. If you have 1 or 2 hours to play a game each day, don't spend it on an MMORPG. Definitely not subscription-based MMO, okay? That would be the dumbest thing you can ever do in your life. It's like literally delusional to even do that. Go play single player games. Go play Baldur's Gate 3. This game would last you for ages if you only have 2 to 3 hours to play each day.
Button, and you're in, get the dungeon done, and you're out. It allows you to find roles reliably. You don't have to sit there waiting for a tank to magically appear, because a tank will end up queuing up. If your server is quieter, if there's less people online, that dungeon finder will tick along and find you the group while you're playing. And here's where your class's role actually does come into play, and it comes into play with the dungeon finder and without. The reason I always end up playing tank is because it is painful trying to get a dungeon together, especially on lower population servers, if you're not the tank. There just aren't tanks about. And in this instance, that is where the dungeon finder helps drastically, even if it does mean you're going to be sat in that queue for a few minutes. It's still far easier than trying to put together the group manually. There's been times where I've leveled alts in classic WoW because I just love leveling alts, and I wished there was dungeon finder in original classic WoW, because I do just want to get in and out of dungeons. Honestly, quests wear me down, and I would like to chain do dungeons, and I get it. That's why I think it would be cool to have that option. Without Dungeon Finder, there's always someone that has to make the group happen, and I would often find myself in the situation where I'm just going to have to start a group, otherwise I'll be sat here waiting for hours. And there is a burden to making your own group, because sometimes it can get overwhelming. If I say looking for more for a dungeon, and it's a popular time, there's people who want to go, suddenly I am inundated with whispers. People are whispering me, DPS, 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 and I'm looking there like, oh my god, what do I do? Suddenly I'm shift left clicking people's...
You just pick the mage or the warlock. That's what you do in TBC. I know. I played Red Paladin. Nobody picked me.
names. This shows you what class they are, so I can say, do I want to take a rogue? Oh, I'm a warrior. Do I want this warrior? And suddenly I'm assessing their roles. Will this fit my group? Do we need a mage? Like, I have to think about those gear overlaps. If I've got a cat druid and a rogue wants to come, that rogue might be annoyed that the cat druid is going to be taking their gear. It makes me stop and think whether certain classes are even worth bringing. If
Feral, I hope you're not talking about cat, okay? You know you're gonna put your bare ass to work in tank, boy.
If I'm, say, doing dead mines and it's a group full of warriors, we're not going to be doing much damage. If I'm running Blackrock Depths and I want the Hand of Justice trinket, or maybe I want a chance at that epic chest plate, and a warrior whispers me saying DPS,
no,
I'm going to sit there and think, I'm
no,
not wait for a mage to message me. If I've got options, I'm going to naturally start filtering people out, and if no mage turns up or a caster, I'll reluctantly message that warrior and invite them to the group. The old system was more...
You'd literally rather not even take the risk and run the dungeon than actually roll with another warrior. No way you're gonna roll with another contender on the breastplate. Ain't no way that happening anytime soon.
Social, but it enables you to be more selective.
Again, I'm a warrior main, guys. I know.
Group. But there's been many times where someone will join the group who is, say, I've got 2 warriors in there, and they'll just leave the group.
Forced to bear, love to cat.
Like, I'm not rolling against another warrior. Which is fair enough. They don't want to waste their time if a piece of gear drops, but everyone can be more selective in that situation. The Dungeon Finder takes all of that out of the equation. You just find the group, the people are put together. It doesn't matter if you've got gear crossover, because you're just going to have to deal with it. And if someone drops out, you just click find members and it will fill that place for you with someone much more willing to be there. You don't have to deal with whispers piling up in your chat screen. You don't have to deal with being picky. You just get handed a group and you get on with it. And a lot of people are comfortable with joining a group for whatever reason, but they're not comfortable with being the one to start the group. So Dungeon Finder saves a tremendous amount of time, and it removes the social hurdle within the game. What's interesting is, in my experience...
But removing social hurdles is actually really bad. I mean, listen, I've been to Japan recently, and even as a tourist, it was really convenient for me to do all of these things by myself with little to no effort whatsoever, but I easily felt the social element just fading away. And it wasn't fun for me, it wasn't good for me, and I ended up not liking it at all. Even though it was super convenient, I really did not enjoy it. And I think it's really bad for humanity to lose that touch with each other. I mean, the reason I love streaming is because I get to connect with you guys. Whenever I made videos alone, it was fun. I enjoy doing that. But doing this, even to like 10 viewers, is way more fun than doing anything I've done until now. So removing friction and all of that stuff, even though it does contribute to convenience a lot, I think at the end of the day, it is doing more bad than good.
Experiences over the years in retail, I saw that selectiveness of forming a group come back. When Mythic Dungeons started to become a thing, and when that became a place on the Dungeon Finder, you could list your group very much in like the way the TBC group finder works. And if I'm making a group, I'm now looking at people's item levels. Who's got the best gear, so who's going to be the biggest pumper to get this dungeon in the most efficient way. I can still decide on what kind of composition I want to make from the players available to me. And this does make sense because Mythic Dungeons are more of a competitive feature. So the normal Dungeon Finder system that we've been talking about becomes a more casual experience. And if you've ever found yourself listing yourself to do a dungeon and you never get an invite, you've been on the other end of that selectiveness. If I've, say, listed myself to do a mythic dungeon and no one invites me, I feel a bit sad, like I wanted to do the dungeon, and inevitably I just end up making my own group and I'm able to do it like that. And with the inception of Dungeon Finder, and particularly cross-realm Dungeon Finder, it was kind of the death of accountability. What I mean by this is if you were a ninja looter, if you were someone who went out of your way to ruin a group, maybe you'd pull some mobs to get everyone wiped and then just leave the group Hearthstone.
Classic.
People would know who you are and they'd probably call you out in the world chat. The amount of times I've seen people saying,
yeah,
don't...
You literally had blacklist for servers, and if you were in on it, bro, you were not going to make it out of there, okay? Unless you did some serious stuff to rectify and, you know, reprimand and all of that, and actually gave the money backs or something that equate to the loot that you just stole, man, you were never coming off that list. Like, never. And some people didn't care. Like, admittedly, some people did it for clips, some did it, like, people did it because they love to watch the world burns, but at the same time, you were still on it, and that contributed a lot. Now, I will say, I think that the future of MMOs is just like Guild Wars 2, where you have mega servers. I think that mega servers are inevitably going to be what MMOs strive to do, because it just enhances the experience and the immersion 10 times more. And you can't really do that with mega servers, at least not as far as I'm aware of. Maybe you, Guild Wars 2 player, can actually shed some light on this situation.
Invite X, he's a ninja looter. Don't invite this guy, you know, for whatever reason, whatever's happened. And people actually have Discords where they have like a blacklist, like a Google document where they're like, do not invite this person. So there was a social cost if you were to decide to just be annoying to the other players on your server. But with Dungeon Finder, and particularly cross-realm, you could decide to try and ruin someone else's day and you'll probably never see them again. If I decided to roll need on everything in Classic, I was probably going to end up in a few arguments. But if I decided to roll need on every item inside of a Dungeon Finder group, then I just move on to the next dungeon and I could probably do it again. So let's answer the question, what actually changed in the feeling of doing a dungeon? The biggest change is that dungeons felt less like places you could visit in the world and just became content. Pre-Dungeon Finder, you had to make your group yourself. You had to travel there. You had to deal with all the faff that comes along with that. And you had a sense of place. You knew where that dungeon was. With the inception of Dungeon Finder, you queue up. The game picks the people you're going to play with for you. The world gets skipped because you don't have to travel there. Players feel temporary because you didn't have to talk to anyone to make the group, and they're just going to disappear after the group. I recently played WoW with a friend who had never...
Everything is ephemeral, just like your copy of World of Warcraft. Keep on paying. It's going to be good.
...played the game before, and we experienced these two different worlds by doing a dungeon in Classic and doing a dungeon in retail. During our dungeon in Classic, we had to travel to the Dead Mines. Before we started the run, we buffed up and got our characters prepared to start. We slowly fought our way through it. And by the end of it, we felt like we had achieved something. And during the first dungeon we did in retail, the tank had already rushed off and was killing mobs before I'd even loaded into the game.
Oh, I'm here. Took me a while to load in. Well, wait, you guys have run off already.
There was no pause before the start of the dungeon.
Nobody cares.
Honestly, for most of the dungeon, it was just about trying to keep up.
Now, this is, I think, the best proof that retail WoW players are just hamsters on a wheel. They literally cannot think. All they do is run in the same place together, think that they're progressing and reaching some greater heights, but they were staying at the exact same position they started. It's sad to see. Like, they can't wake up. We cannot even open their eyes. We cannot save them. Believe me, I tried. Whenever you try to reach them, whenever you try to help them, see the wrongs that Blizzard is doing for them or to them, they would always ostracize you. They will always speak against you, and they would shame you for even trying to speak against the multi-billion-dollar company.
With the tank, I just kept falling behind. I think this right here shows the contrast between having Dungeon Finder and having no Dungeon Finder immediately, because it's the lead up to that experience kind of shows you what the experience of the dungeon is going to be like. It's about the speed that you get into the dungeon and the speed of when you're inside the dungeon. Let's get the thoughts from the man himself on what these two dungeon experiences were like.
I just feel like Classic is more rewarding. You're more engaged with the fight. Its simplicity is perfect to me. Yeah, there's more communication. I might be wrong because I have not got through majority of the dungeons, but as a first-hand experience, it felt like you were more communicated with people around you. I think with WoW Retail, it kind of waters down all those elements. You can't really take into account of what the whole dungeon is about. It doesn't feel engaging. It just removes it all. It's like putting nail varnish on something and like nail varnish remover, and then it just ruins it even more.
So, was Dungeon Finder really a turning point for World of Warcraft? I think the fairest answer
Not really. It's more of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It wasn't just a singular thing. It was all of these other decisions made by Blizzard that came into one big amalgamation that eventually changed World of Warcraft from what we used to know and love into current modern retail version of it, which I guess most of us don't like anymore, but maybe it's just me. But again, it's not one step, it's many, right? It's the butterfly effect kicking into, actually the giant storm that we have to deal with today.
to this is it isn't the only turning point, but it is one of
Exactly.
the
You
clearest
see-
examples we can point to. It wasn't an instant death blow to the game because there's good
Nope.
sides to it, and when it came out, I really
It wasn't.
enjoyed it. And acting like everything before Dungeon Finder was perfect is nonsense. And I totally understand why people point to Dungeon Finder. It's come to represent a design shift, that there's less friction to starting a group. There's less reasons to depend on the server you're playing on. There's no reason to even find the dungeon in the world. You don't really need to remember any of the people that you're running the game with. There's more convenience. It gave access to dungeons to people that may have avoided this content because of the friction behind it. You can just simply press the Dungeon Finder button, find group, and get in. It
Oh, it's
saves so
heteronauts.
much time, and I've personally used it many times over the years to jump in and get a few levels on ults. Honestly, I think Blizzard did actually listen to the players saying that they wanted to do dungeons in a more convenient way, and they gave it to us. And this system still ended up becoming one of the most divisive systems in the game. Blizzard really can't win. Dungeon Finder isn't the only turning point, but it may have been the moment when WoW started to feel just a little bit smoother and less reliant on
Man,
the world.
I really need
And
to
at the
play
end
Wrath
the
of the
day,
Lich King
this is
Classic
why
when
I'm
it
grateful
comes
we
for
have
the
multiple
100th
versions
time.
of World of Warcraft. If I'm subbing up to the game, which doesn't happen too often these days, but it's usually for a classic experience. That's the kind of player that I am. And for you, retail might be the reason you subscribe to the game. And I'm grateful for the fact that if I want to, I
No, you should seek help. And not from, psychiatrists, from God.
can try retail out, maybe get a few levels on a random character just to see what the game is like today. So really, whether you think that the Dungeon Finder was the turning point or a good feature or a bad feature, we have multiple versions of the game, so it doesn't really matter. So what system would you like me to take a look at next? I'm thinking of talking about
Damn, he's flexing again.
GDKPs and how they changed the experience, particularly for me during my classic experience, because GDKPs, they did provide a lot of fun for me. I was able to do some pumping, but I think if I wasn't a raider within a guild, I think that GDKPs may have been a completely different experience because I had a guild to fall back on, and that's how I got all the gear for my character back in, this is in Classic 2019 I'm talking about. It meant that I was able to join some GDKPs as a pumper, and I did have a lot of fun doing those dungeons, and well, Zul'Gurub was one of my favourite ones to do because it was easy. I was also thinking about talking about difficulty. Do you want WoW to be a hard game? If I'm honest, I don't. I like it to be a really casual experience, and that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed Classic
fascinated.
so much, because it's not a
I cannot look away.
challenging game. it mostly comes down to organisation and prepping and making sure your character has the, you know, the world bus or the right gear. And there you go, there's the cube done. I just thought I'd do that while I share with you the kind of ideas I'm thinking of talking about. If you enjoyed this video, I don't mind doing more of these. We can talk about systems, because I've played this bloody game for far too many years.
Man,
I mean, I don't even really
he loved
play it
flexing
much
the
these
original
days, but
copy.
I've got so many memories and experiences from playing this game.
Yeah, I mean, good. It seems to be the end of the video. By the way, obviously, I'm going to leave a link in the description. You guys should check his channel out. He makes such fantastic World of Warcraft content. I truly enjoyed every single one of his videos. But yeah, he was absolutely right. So at the end of the day, I pretty much said all that I had to. But dungeon finders, again, weren't the, you know, the cut point where Blizzard went like, oh, we went from classic to retail. Like, no, it definitely wasn't that. He said it himself. And I think, again, if Blizzard want to make something good with a dungeon fighter, they should just make it so it queue ups for a group. You get a group, but you still have to walk to the dungeon. It would be the best solution. And honestly, just the best of both worlds.